Where are you?
Welcome to the first tale in our revenge series. Today we're diving into the story of a farmer who finds out the hard way that some things should never be messed with. But before we start, make sure you subscribe to my channel, unless you want me to come and pay you a little visit. Alright, let's get into the story. My name is Thomas McGregor, and I was once proud of my farm, nestled in the quiet hills of rural Scotland. Life was simple and good. My wife, Mary, and our son, James, were my world. The farm thrived, the animals were healthy, and our lives were peaceful. Or so I thought. But that peace was shattered one bitter winter, when the snow came early and brought with it something far more sinister. It started with the rabbits. I noticed one or two missing at first, thought maybe a weasel had gotten in. But soon, more were disappearing, and each morning I found their pens empty. No broken locks, no signs of struggle, just gone. I knew it had to be foxes. They're clever, those creatures, but this felt different, calculated, like they were taunting me. The more I lost, the angrier I became. I wasn't going to let them win. I went into town and bought the best traps I could find. Vicious, serrated things designed to snap shut with the slightest pressure. I set them around the rabbit pens, careful to cover them with straw so they'd be invisible. Then I waited, eager for dawn, certain I'd catch the culprit. Morning came, and I rushed outside, my breath clouding in the freezing air. There it was, a white fox, trapped in one of the snares. Its leg was crushed, blood staining the pristine snow. The way it looked at me, with those eyes, it was almost human, filled with a burning fury that unsettled me. But I shook it off. It was just an animal after all, and I had work to do. I ended its life quickly, skinned it, and hung the pelt outside to dry. That night, I felt a grim satisfaction. I'd won. But that night, as the wind howled through the trees, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I lay in bed, eyes wide open, listening to the creaking of the old farmhouse. My mind kept drifting back to those eyes, the way they seemed to pierce right through me. I told myself it was just my imagination, but sleep wouldn't come. Finally, I got up, moved to the window, and peered out into the dark. And that's when I saw them. Two glowing eyes staring at me from the edge of the woods. My heart jumped into my throat. It was the same fox. It had to be. But no, that was impossible. I killed it, skinned it with my own hands. But those eyes, they were filled with a hatred so intense, it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I blinked, and they were gone, swallowed by the night. I tried to forget about it, to tell myself it was just the stress of the last few days getting to me. But the next morning, my world came crashing down. Mary didn't wake up. I shook her, called her name, but she was gone. The doctor said it was a heart attack, that these things happen, especially in such harsh winters. But I couldn't believe it. Her face, it was twisted in terror, as if something had scared her to death. And there were marks on her skin, deep scratches that looked like they'd been made by claws. I buried her in the frozen ground, my heart hollowed out with grief. But the farm needed tending, and James needed me. So I forced myself to keep going. The feeling of being watched never left me. Every night I felt those eyes on me, even when I couldn't see them. I kept the windows locked, the doors bolted, but it didn't matter. The dread was like a living thing, wrapping itself around me, squeezing the air from my lungs. A week later, I found James in the barn. His neck was twisted, his body cold. They told me he must have slipped, fallen from the loft, but I knew better. There were fox tracks in the snow, leading away from the barn. My boy, my sweet, clever boy, was gone, taken from me by that damned fox. I couldn't bear it. I went to the village priest, Father O'Connell, and poured out the whole story. He listened, his brow furrowed in concern, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. He told me to pray, to find solace in the Lord, but I knew there was no solace for me. Not now. The nights grew darker, the shadows longer. I stopped going outside after dark. The farm fell into disrepair, but I didn't care. Nothing mattered anymore. I was just waiting for the fox to come back and finish what it had started. One night the wind picked up, howling like a beast outside. I could hear it scratching at the door, a low guttural sound that made my stomach twist. I grabbed my rifle, my hands shaking, and went to the door. I hesitated, my breath catching in my throat. I knew what was on the other side, and part of me didn't want to open it. But I had to. I had to end this. I flung the door open, the wind slamming it against the wall. There was nothing there, just the empty yard, the snow swirling in the darkness. But I wasn't alone. I could feel it, that presence, those eyes burning into me from the shadows. I stepped outside, the snow crunching under my boots, and followed the tracks up the hill to where I'd killed the fox. The clearing was eerily silent, the snow thick and untouched, except for the tracks that led me there. And there it was, standing in the center, its fur white as the snow, its eyes glowing with that same burning hatred. My heart pounded in my ears, but I forced myself to raise the rifle. My finger hovered over the trigger, but before I could pull it, the fox spoke. Its voice wasn't human, but it wasn't entirely animal either. It was a low, rasping whisper that cut through the wind.
"You took what was mine,"
it said, the words hanging in the freezing air.
"Now I'll take what's yours."
I froze, the rifle trembling in my hands. The snow whipped around me, stinging my face, but I couldn't move. I watched as the fox's eyes flared with a terrible light, and then everything went black. I woke up in my bed, the fire cold and dead, in the hearth. I didn't know how I got there, but the weight of dread hung heavy on me. I knew I was living on borrowed time. The fox had come for me, and it wouldn't stop until it had taken everything. For days, I wandered the house like a ghost, not eating, barely drinking. I knew it was only a matter of time. The night it came for me, I heard the scratching at the door, the growl rumbling deep in its throat. I didn't get up. I didn't even try to fight. I just lay there, waiting for the end. They found me the next morning, lying in my bed, my face contorted in the same terror that had claimed Mary. They said it was a heart attack, a natural end for a man who had lost everything. But I knew better. The fox had its revenge, and there was nothing left for me in this world. Now, my farm stands abandoned, the fields overgrown, the house crumbling. They say that on cold winter nights, you can still see the fox, prowling the edges of the woods, its eyes glowing with a hatred that never fades. And if you listen closely, you can hear the scratching at the door, a reminder that some debts can never be repaid.